So we left off with the Protestant Reformation. So we just want to be clear that the Protestant Reformation, I'm not going to spell out all of Reformation, but REF leads to what? What is going to be the response? The Counter-Reformation or the Catholic Reformation, which was the Council of Trent. Again, REF. Protestant Reformation, Martin Luther, John Calvin, Zwingli, all of this leads to the Catholic Church responding with the Council of Trent and reorganizing, and Jesuits trying to convert people through exploration. Look what happens to Europe, the map. I mean, most of Western Europe is green, which is Catholic. And now, because of the Protestant Reformation, much of it is not. Much of it is Protestant, so Lutherans up in Northern Europe, Scandinavia, Calvinists in Switzerland and France, Anglicans in England, Bohemians in the Holy Roman Empire. Interesting, Anabaptists in Prussia, they believed you could not be baptized until you were an adult and old enough to make the decision whether you were accepting the Christian religion. So Anabaptists, all of this changes religion in Europe drastically. Remember, Eastern Europe, is going to be the Orthodox. Remember, we have the Byzantine Empire in Rome and Justinian bringing the Eastern Orthodox sect of Christianity into Eastern Europe and Russia as well. And then we have, that's going to change into Islam as well. Okay, but I want you to really focus on Western Europe and look at the dramatic changes in religion. All green Catholic, and now we have lots of Western Europe practicing Protestantism. And what is that going to lead to? Conflict. You have conflict already because the borders are so close and there's competition, and now you're going to have religious conflict on top of political conflict and mercantilistic conflict, so lots of conflict in Europe. This is an age of crisis, according to your textbook and many historians. But it's also an age of absolutism, which means the king is absolutely in control over their kingdom. So what we have here is the Palace of Versailles. We have monumental architecture, largest palatial structure in Western Europe, built by Louis the 14th, the Sun King. Many historians believe he was the most powerful monarch in Western European history. He builds Versailles as this monumental architecture showpiece. Look how powerful I am. And he moves the nobility into Versailles with him. And he makes them do little chores and whatnot. And if he nods at them, that means he favors them. The most liked nobles actually got to help him put on his pajamas. So when the nobles are living with him and they're engaged with competing against one another for his favor, that means they're less likely to plot his overthrow. So Versailles, this tribute to absolutism outside of Paris that Louis XIV builds, in France. So absolutism means power over, and this is important, not only the nobility that you see here that have to live here with Louis XIV, but what all other institutions are also powerful in France and Europe. We've got the nobles, the church, the clergy, control over the clergy in your country, and trade and business. So if you have control over the nobles, business, church, then you are an absolute leader, and you also use divine right, which means what? That God ordains your power. So this is what is occurring in Europe against the backdrop, as we've already seen, religious conflict, but this absolute power is going to be challenged by many other conflicts that are taking place across Europe. The first one that we'll look at, in this crisis of conflict are witch trials. I think we think of the Salem witch trials in Massachusetts as being the witch trials. In Europe, over 100,000 people are tried for being witches. The great percentage of those are females. Okay, 80% maybe are females. 80% are going to be executed too. So over 50,000 people are going to be executed. Again, the majority of them are women. And why is this happening? Well, historians look back at this and they see that many of these women were single. They weren't married, or they were widowed, so they don't have a husband. Many of them also, historians have seen records, were kind of outspoken in their community, or even Protestant. So religion figures in, women that don't have a male in their household figures in, and some historians have referred to this as a genderized murder, almost genocide against a gender in Europe in these witch trials. It's going to start to slow down when the Enlightenment starts to become more powerful, and we haven't seen the Enlightenment yet in Europe, but the Enlightenment is going to be about reason and going away from religion. And when that trend starts to happen more powerfully in Europe, more potently, then that's when we see these witch trials stopping. So crisis with gender and religion in Europe with these witch trials. We have a lot of religious conflict. We have in England, and you probably remember this from past historical studies, the Spanish Armada in 1588. This is when Philip II of Spain, Habsburg, sends the Spanish Armada against England and Elizabeth I, because she is going to make England permanently Anglican, and that means not Catholic. And Philip II had this nickname. He was the defender of the Catholic faith, and he is going to try to make England again Catholic, and that's not going to happen. The Spanish are going to be defeated by English naval forces, the strategy of Elizabeth I, and also nature. So Mother Nature will intervene on behalf of the English, and England will remain, as it is today, Anglican, the Church of England, Episcopalian. Okay, so Catholicism versus Protestantism and the Anglican Church. Okay, one religious war. In France, we have religious wars. So in France, you can just put religious wars. And who do you think are going to be fighting these religious wars in France? Let's go back. We can see some purple here. So Calvinists. They're also called Huguenots. So Calvinist, Huguenots, they're Protestant. And they're living in France, which is predominantly Catholic, and there's going to be conflict. And they're going to seek protection by the king, the monarch, Henry of Navarre. And he's going to issue, when he becomes king, the edict, this is important, of Nantes, Nantes, which gives the Huguenots, the Protestants living in France, the ability to practice Protestantism, to practice Calvinism. And this is interesting because he was Protestant, but when he became king of France, he converted to Catholicism. And he issues this famous quote, "Paris is well worth a mass. Becoming king of France is well worth converting to Catholicism." But he still wanted to protect those Protestants that he was one of until he became king of France in the Edict of Nantes. This is going to be eradicated basically by Louis XIV. He's going to get rid of the Edict of Nantes, and a lot of Calvinists are going to have to move out of France because there is a lot of violence being perpetrated against them. So we've got the Spanish Armada, Protestants versus Catholics, France, Spain. In France itself, we have Catholics and Protestants warring. We also, in the Holy Roman Empire, you can see right here, we're just going to abbreviate it, HRE, Holy Roman Empire. This is essentially what will become Germany, but it's much of which is under the jurisdiction of the Pope in the form of taxes and whatnot. There's going to be something called the 30 Years' War. And sometimes in history, the number, a numerical title, isn't actually like the 100 Years' War is way over 100 years. The 30 Years' War is actually 30 years. It's 1618 to 1648. And again, it's Catholics fighting against Protestants in these Germanic areas here. 25% of the German or Holy Roman Empire population will die. 25%. So brutal, brutal wars. It ends in the Peace of Westphalia, which allows people the ability to practice either Catholicism or Protestantism, and for nobility to make those choices in the Holy Roman Empire. You don't have to practice Catholicism. We've still got a little bit more. Actually, yeah, one more thing that I'd like to cover in terms of crisis, and that is economic crisis. Mercantilism. I pronounce it mercantilism, it's fine. This is focused on exploration, and the impetus, the cause for exploration is a desire for resources abroad, in the Americas, in the Indian Ocean. So really metals, gold and silver. I did silver first and then gold, sorry. So gold and silver. And so gold and silver are going to be very, very important and desired, and then cash crops. And so Europe, as we've seen, these countries are engaged overseas in mercantilism. They want to control these resources and make their countries wealthier and have a monopoly on them and have colonies that support them with raw materials that they will eventually use industrial practices in the Industrial Revolution to make money off of. But you can see Europe in this competition for resources. There are going to be wars fought in the Americas and in the Indian Ocean, these conflicts and disputes, and it leads to greater conflict, mercantilism, so economic. So please put this in your economic category. Okay, a lot of the other material can be cultural or political, social for women, and witchcraft, the witch trials in Europe. And then finally, I don't want to forget Europe. And this is sometimes not considered Europe. The question is, what is Russia? Is Russia Europe? Is Russia Asia? I think a lot of historians put kind of a border here with everything to the west, Europe, and then more to the east, Siberia is Asia. Anyways, Russia has issues with who are they? Identity issues. And one of their great leaders, Peter the Great, is going to be engaged in a campaign of westernization. You've seen Peter and the choices that he's had to make in terms of conquering territory. And what would you do if you were Peter the Great? Well, he wants to westernize Russia. He wants to make it more like Europe. He actually goes on a trip in disguise, and he's in the Netherlands, and he's working on a boat as a carpenter just to understand what life is like for the average European. And he wants to bring that back. He wants to bring science and reason and engineering back to Russia. And he also wants and is successful in getting this port city of St. Petersburg from Sweden in the Great Northern War. This is important, St. Petersburg, Peter the Great, because it gives Russia access to Europe with trade through the sea. Russia, up until this point, is landlocked. And he tries to get more territory on the Black Sea here, and it's going to be pretty unsuccessful. It's going to be Catherine the Great that will eventually accomplish this, so that Russia has gateways to Western Europe, north and south through the sea, and they're not landlocked. So Peter the Great